The cemetery security camera would later show exactly what happened that Thursday morning at 7:12 a.m. at Greenwood Memorial Park in Decatur, Georgia. A black woman in her early 40s knelt beside a small headstone in the back section of the cemetery. She wore a simple gray coat and held a bouquet of fresh sunflowers. Her name was Denise Carter. She was visiting her son Marcus, who had died at the age of 14 from a rare heart condition 6 years earlier. She had not missed a single day, not one. Rain, snow, heat, holidays. For 6 straight years, Denise had driven to that cemetery every morning before work, placed fresh flowers at her son's grave, and sat with him for a few quiet minutes. The cemetery staff knew her by name. The groundskeeper had even started leaving a small bench near Marcus's headstone because she was there so often. Officer Dale Briscoe of the Decatur Police Department pulled into the cemetery parking lot at 7:09 a.m. that morning. He was responding to what he later described as a suspicious person report. But no such report was ever found in the dispatch logs. No one had called. No one had complained. Briscoe made it up. He saw Denise from across the cemetery grounds, and something in his expression changed. He stepped out of his cruiser, adjusted his belt, and started walking toward her with purpose. What this officer did not know was that he had just made the worst mistake of his entire career. A mistake that would cost him his badge, his pension, his freedom, and $8.2 million of the city's money. The cemetery security cameras were recording. A jogger passing by on the adjacent trail had her phone out, and the woman he was about to handcuff and humiliate in front of her dead child's grave was about to become the face of the biggest civil rights case Decatur had seen in decades. Denise Carter was 42 years old. She had worked as a registered nurse at Emory University Hospital for 17 years. She started as a floor nurse right out of school and worked her way up to charge nurse in the intensive care unit, one of the most demanding positions in any hospital. Her supervisors described her as unshakable. She had received the hospital's Nurse of the Year award twice. In 17 years, she had never received a single disciplinary action. She was the kind of person who stayed late to hold a dying patient's hand when their family could not make it in time. The kind of person who brought homemade soup to elderly neighbors when they were sick. The kind of person who had never been in trouble a day in her life. Not a speeding ticket, not a noise complaint, nothing. When Marcus died in 2018, it nearly destroyed her. He was her only child. His father had left when Marcus was 3, and Denise had raised him completely on her own. She worked double shifts to make sure he had everything he needed. He was a bright kid, loved science, loved basketball. He had been diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy at the age of 10, and despite the best medical care available, his heart gave out one afternoon while he was sitting in his room doing homework. He was 14 years old. He died before the ambulance arrived. Denise channeled her grief into a daily routine that gave her peace. Every morning at 6:45, she would stop at the small flower shop on Maple Street, pick up a fresh bouquet of sunflowers because they were Marcus's favorite, and drive to Greenwood Memorial Park. She would place the flowers at Marcus's headstone, sit on the bench, and talk to him for 10 or 15 minutes. She would tell him about her day, about work, about what was happening in the world. Sometimes she would just sit there quietly and close her eyes. Then she would drive to the hospital for her shift. It was her way of holding on to him. Everyone who knew her understood that. Nobody questioned it. Nobody had a problem with it, until Officer Briscoe showed up. That Thursday morning, October 17th, 2024, was supposed to be no different. She had no idea that in the next 20 minutes she would be handcuffed, forced to the ground, and arrested in front of her son's grave. The irony of what was about to happen to a woman who spent her life saving others would not be lost on anyone who heard this story later. Officer Dale Briscoe had been with the Decatur Police Department for 6 years. He was 34 years old, and within the department he had a reputation. Not a good one. 9 formal complaints in 6 years. Most of them involved black residents. Most of them described the same pattern: aggressive behavior, unnecessary stops, and an attitude that made people feel like they had already been found guilty before he even opened his mouth. But Briscoe had never faced real discipline. A few notes in his file, 1 mandatory training session, nothing that changed a thing. He approached Denise from behind as she knelt at the grave. She did not hear him until he was standing directly over her. His shadow fell across the headstone and she looked up, startled. He did not introduce himself properly. He did not ask her name or explain why he was there. His first words were an order. He told her she needed to step away from the grave immediately. Denise stood up slowly, still holding the sunflowers. She was confused. She told him her name and explained that this was her son's grave. She had been coming here every single day for 6 years. The staff knew her. She had permission. There was no problem. Briscoe did not seem to hear any of it, or maybe he heard it and did not care. He told her the cemetery was not open to the public at this hour and that she was trespassing. This was a lie. Greenwood Memorial Park opened its gates at 6 o'clock a.m. every day. Denise had entered through the open main gate, just like she always did. She told him the gate was open and that she came here every morning. She asked him if someone had complained. Briscoe did not answer. Instead, he asked her a question that told her everything she needed to know about why he was really there. He asked her if she actually had family buried here, or if she was just hanging around. The implication was clear. A black woman in a predominantly white cemetery early in the morning did not belong there in his mind. Denise felt the sting of that question immediately. She had spent 6 years grieving at this spot. She had buried her only child 10 feet from where she was standing, and this man was questioning whether she had a right to be there. Around them, the cemetery was quiet and peaceful. 2 other visitors were already present that morning. An elderly white man was placing flowers at a grave 3 rows over. A white couple was walking slowly along the main path. Neither of them had been approached. Neither of them had been questioned. Neither of them had been told they were trespassing. Nobody asked them if they actually had family buried here. Denise noticed. She always noticed. Denise reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She wanted to call the cemetery office to confirm what she already knew, that she was allowed to be there. But the moment she reached for her phone, Briscoe's entire demeanor changed. His voice got louder. His body shifted forward. He told her to put the phone down. She told him she was just calling the cemetery office. He told her again, louder this time, to put the phone away. She looked at him and told him calmly and clearly that she had every right to make a phone call. She was not yelling. She was not aggressive. She was standing next to her son's grave with sunflowers in one hand and a phone in the other. That was when Briscoe grabbed her arm, hard. The sunflowers fell to the ground next to Marcus's headstone. Some of the petals scattered across the grass. He spun her around and told her she was being detained for trespassing and failure to comply with a lawful order. Denise told him she was not resisting. She told him she was a nurse. She told him her son was buried right there. She asked him to please just let her show him her son's name on the headstone. It was right there, Marcus Elijah Carter, 2004 to 2018, beloved son. All he had to do was look down. Briscoe did not look at the headstone. He did not slow down. He did not pause for even 1 second. He forced her hands behind her back and put handcuffs on her. The metal dug into her wrists. She was still talking to him, still trying to explain, still trying to get through to him. Her voice was shaking now, but she was not yelling. She was not fighting. She was doing everything right, and it did not matter. He pushed her down to her knees on the grass right next to her son's grave. Her knees hit the soft ground inches from the headstone she had visited 2,190 days in a row. The bouquet of sunflowers lay scattered around her, yellow petals mixed with the morning dew on the grass. The image of a grieving mother being forced to the ground beside her dead child's headstone while fresh flowers lay crushed beneath her was almost too much to comprehend. If you had described this scene to someone without telling them it was real, they would have said you made it up. But it happened, every second of it. A jogger named Sarah Mitchell was running on the trail that bordered the cemetery. She heard the commotion and stopped. She saw the officer forcing a woman to the ground next to a gravestone. She could see flowers scattered everywhere. She pulled out her phone and started recording immediately. She did not hesitate. Something about what she was seeing felt deeply, fundamentally wrong, and she knew she needed to document it. Her video would later become the most important piece of evidence in the entire case. From her angle, the footage showed everything. It showed Denise on her knees, handcuffed, crying quietly. It showed the sunflowers scattered on the ground. It showed Marcus's headstone clearly visible with his name and dates. It showed Briscoe standing over her, talking into his radio, completely unbothered by what he was doing. He did not look remorseful. He did not look conflicted. He looked like a man who thought he was in complete control of the situation. The cemetery groundskeeper, a man named Thomas Okafor, saw what was happening from across the grounds. He had known Denise for years. He was the one who had placed the bench near Marcus's headstone for her. He ran over, waving his arms. He told Briscoe that this woman came here every single day, that she had permission, that everyone at the cemetery knew her. He told Briscoe her name. He pointed at the headstone and told him that was her son. He begged Briscoe to take the handcuffs off. Briscoe told Thomas to step back or he would be arrested too. Thomas looked at Denise with pain in his eyes. He was a witness to something terrible, and the officer was threatening him for trying to help. Thomas pulled out his own phone and called the cemetery's main office. This was Briscoe's third massive mistake, and the walls were closing in fast. Briscoe called dispatch and reported that he had detained a female trespasser who was being combative and refusing to leave the premises. This was completely false. The body camera footage, which Briscoe apparently forgot was running, showed the exact opposite. Denise had been calm, cooperative, and respectful from the very first moment. She had not raised her voice. She had not made any aggressive movements. She had tried to explain herself multiple times, and Briscoe had ignored her every single time. Filing a false report with dispatch was not just a policy violation. It was a crime. A second officer arrived within 8 minutes. Officer Karen Wells stepped out of her cruiser and immediately assessed the scene. She saw a woman on her knees in handcuffs next to a child's gravestone. She saw scattered flowers. She saw a civilian groundskeeper standing nearby, visibly upset. And she saw Briscoe standing there as if nothing unusual was happening. Wells asked Briscoe what the situation was. He told her the woman was trespassing and had become aggressive. Wells looked at Denise, who was quietly crying with her head bowed. Wells looked at the headstone. She read the name, Marcus Elijah Carter, 2004 to 2018, beloved son. Wells asked Briscoe if he had confirmed whether the woman had a family member buried here. Briscoe said it did not matter because the cemetery was closed. Thomas interrupted immediately. He told Wells the cemetery had been open since 6 o'clock that morning. He said Denise had been coming every single morning for 6 years and that everyone on staff knew her. He told her that no one from the cemetery had called the police. No one had made any complaint about anything. Wells looked at Briscoe. The expression on her face said it all. She knew this was wrong. She quietly told Briscoe that they should remove the handcuffs and sort this out. Briscoe refused. He said he was the senior officer on scene and that the arrest was already in progress. Do you think Officer Wells did enough in this moment, or should she have done more to stop it? Let me know in the comments. Wells stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. She did not remove the handcuffs herself, but she also did not help Briscoe load Denise into his cruiser. That middle ground would later become part of the investigation, too. By the time Briscoe walked Denise to his patrol car, 4 people were recording. Sarah the jogger, Thomas the groundskeeper, and 2 other cemetery visitors who had walked over. Every angle was covered. Every second was documented. At the station, the booking process did not last long. The desk sergeant took one look at the arrest report and knew something was very wrong. Trespassing at a public cemetery, during posted hours, with a family member buried there, none of it made sense. He pulled up the cemetery's records and found Denise Carter listed as the primary contact for Plot 247, Section D, where Marcus Carter was buried. She had been paying for the plot maintenance every single year for 6 years. Her name was all over the records. The sergeant called the cemetery director, who confirmed everything. Denise Carter was not only allowed to be there, she was one of the most recognized regular visitors at Greenwood Memorial Park. The staff considered her practically family. The director was furious. He told the sergeant that no one from the cemetery had called the police. No complaint had been made. There was no suspicious person report. He said, if anything, Briscoe was the one who was not supposed to be there that morning. The whole thing had been fabricated. When the sergeant brought this information to the watch commander, the atmosphere in the station changed fast. The watch commander reviewed the body camera footage from beginning to end. Every minute of it told the same story. Denise was calm. Briscoe was the aggressor. The trespassing claim was baseless. The report of a combative suspect was a complete lie. Denise was released within 2 hours. All charges were dropped immediately, but the damage was already done. She had been handcuffed in front of her son's grave. She had been forced to the ground where she knelt every morning to talk to her dead child. She had been treated like a criminal for doing the one thing that kept her connected to her boy. No amount of dropping charges could undo that. When Denise walked out of the station, she did not say a word to anyone. She did not make a statement. She did not ask questions. She got in her car, drove back to the cemetery, picked up the crushed sunflowers from the ground, and placed a fresh bunch at Marcus's headstone. She sat on the bench. She stayed for an hour. The groundskeeper, Thomas, brought her a cup of coffee and sat with her in silence. Sarah Mitchell's video hit social media that same evening. She posted it with a caption describing exactly what she saw. A mother being arrested for visiting her dead child's grave. By midnight, the video had over 800,000 views. By the next morning, it had crossed 5 million. By the end of the week, it had been viewed more than 22 million times across every major platform. The image that people kept sharing was the one frame where you could see Denise on her knees, handcuffed, with sunflowers scattered around Marcus's headstone. That single image told the entire story without a single word. Local news picked it up within hours. By the next afternoon, it was national news. Every major network ran the story. The scattered sunflowers became the defining symbol of the case. Journalists called it the sunflower arrest. People were furious. The comments, the shares, the calls to the police department, the protests outside City Hall. It was overwhelming, and it was not slowing down. Briscoe's history came out fast. Those 9 previous complaints painted a disturbing picture. 7 of the 9 involved black residents. The complaints described the same behavior over and over. Unnecessary stops, aggressive questioning, and a clear pattern of targeting people based on the color of their skin. A black teenager stopped for walking through a park. A black business owner questioned outside his own shop. A black college student detained while studying in her parked car. The same story, different victims. The department had flagged a few incidents. Briscoe was sent to one implicit bias training session. He received 2 verbal warnings. None of it mattered. None of it changed him. The system let him keep going until he finally targeted a grieving mother at her son's grave, and the whole world watched. Type justice in the comments if you think this kind of pattern should have been stopped long before it reached this point. More victims came forward after the story broke. A retired school teacher said Briscoe had detained her for 10 minutes at a bus stop. A young father said Briscoe had pulled him over 3 times in 2 months for no valid reason. A church deacon said Briscoe had questioned him for sitting in his own car in a parking lot. 14 people came forward in total over the following 2 weeks. People who had been too afraid or too tired to file complaints before, but who now felt safe enough to speak because the whole country was watching. The stories were remarkably similar. The pattern was undeniable. Denise gave one interview to a local journalist she trusted. She was calm and composed the way she was with her patients. She said she did not want fame or attention. She just wanted to visit her son in peace. She said the hardest part was not the handcuffs or the arrest. It was being forced to the ground right next to Marcus. She said she felt like they had disrespected not just her, but him, her boy who never hurt anyone, her boy who loved sunflowers. The interview resonated because Denise was not performing anger or demanding revenge. She was simply telling the truth about what happened and what it felt like. Her quiet strength made the message even more powerful than any shouting ever could have. The Decatur Police Department fired Officer Dale Briscoe 9 days after the incident. The termination letter cited illegal detention, filing a false report, excessive use of force, conduct unbecoming an officer, and a documented pattern of racially biased policing. His badge was taken. His service weapon was collected. He was escorted from the building by 2 officers who used to be his colleagues. His police certification was revoked by the state, meaning he could never work in law enforcement anywhere in Georgia again. But the firing was just the beginning. The county prosecutor's office filed criminal charges against Briscoe 3 weeks later. 2 counts: deprivation of civil rights under color of law and filing a false police report. Both were felonies. If convicted on both counts, he was looking at up to 7 years in prison. Briscoe's lawyer tried to argue that his client had made an honest mistake and genuinely believed the cemetery was closed at that hour. That argument fell apart the moment prosecutors showed the body camera footage. The main gate was wide open. Other visitors were clearly present and visible in the background. The cemetery's posted hours sign was visible from the parking lot. Briscoe had driven right past it. There was no honest mistake here. There was only a choice, and Briscoe made the wrong one. The defense then tried to argue that Briscoe felt threatened when Denise reached for her phone. Prosecutors played the footage frame by frame. Denise had told him she was calling the cemetery office. She moved slowly. She was not aggressive. She was not threatening. She was a 42-year-old nurse holding sunflowers. The idea that she posed any kind of threat was laughable, and the jury saw right through it. If you have made it this far, you are part of the solution. Subscribe and share this video so more people can hear this story. Stories like this need to reach as many people as possible. The trial lasted 6 days. The courtroom was packed every single day. Sarah Mitchell testified about what she saw from the jogging trail. Thomas Okafor testified about Denise's daily visits and Briscoe's refusal to listen. Officer Wells testified that she had told Briscoe to remove the handcuffs and he refused. The body camera footage played 3 times in its entirety. The prosecution also presented Briscoe's full complaint history and testimony from 4 of his previous victims. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on both counts. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge said she had watched the footage multiple times and that what she saw was not a mistake. It was cruelty. Briscoe was sentenced to 14 months in state prison, 3 years of supervised probation after that, 200 hours of community service with a civil rights organization, and a permanent ban from working in any law enforcement or security capacity anywhere in the country. For someone who had built his entire identity around being a cop, this was the complete destruction of everything he knew. Separately, Denise filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Decatur and the police department for civil rights violations, false arrest, excessive force, and emotional distress. The city fought it initially, but once the criminal conviction came through and the pattern of ignored complaints was public, their position collapsed. The settlement was $8.2 million. It was one of the largest settlements for a single incident of police misconduct in the state's history. Denise said it was never about the money. She said she would have traded every single dollar just to have been left alone that morning with her son. Briscoe's career was completely destroyed. He was 34 years old with a felony conviction, no pension, and a name that anyone with internet access could find in seconds. His personal life fell apart too. Friends distanced themselves. His marriage ended. The man who had walked into that cemetery with all the power in the world now had none. These were not things Denise wished on him. but they were the natural consequences of his choices. 3 supervisors who had reviewed Briscoe's previous complaints without taking meaningful action were also disciplined. 1 was demoted from sergeant back to patrol officer. 1 was placed on 30 days of unpaid suspension. 1 resigned before the internal investigation was completed, likely knowing what the outcome would be. The department was making it clear that ignoring problem officers would now carry real consequences for everyone up the chain. The city agreed to a federal consent decree as part of the civil settlement. The decree required new mandatory training on implicit bias for all officers, an independent civilian oversight board to review complaints, a reformed early warning system to flag officers with repeated complaints, and 5 years of federal monitoring. The financial cost to the city went far beyond the $8.2 million settlement. Legal fees, training programs, oversight structures, and the damage to the city's reputation would cost taxpayers for years to come. Officer Wells, who had arrived as backup, was reassigned to desk duty and required to complete additional training on intervention obligations. The investigation found that while she recognized the situation was wrong, she did not do enough to stop it. Her case became a lesson in the responsibility of bystander officers. Knowing something is wrong and not acting is its own kind of failure. Denise continued her daily visits to Marcus's grave. Nothing changed about her routine, not a single thing. The same time every morning, fresh sunflowers every day. The cemetery installed a permanent memorial bench in Marcus's section, donated by community members from across the country who had been moved by her story. A small plaque on the bench read, "For Marcus, forever loved, forever visited." The story of what happened to Denise Carter that Thursday morning is not just about one officer and one mother. It is about how power can be abused against the most vulnerable people in the most sacred moments of their lives. It is about a system that allowed an officer with 9 complaints to keep his badge until he did something so outrageous that the whole country demanded he lose it. Denise never asked to be a symbol. She was just a mother visiting her child's grave, the same way she had done 290 mornings before that one. But her experience became a powerful example of why accountability matters, why oversight matters, and why the people we give authority to must be held to the highest possible standard. Because when they are not, people like Denise pay the price. 17 years of saving lives in an intensive care unit. A woman who held dying strangers' hands so they would not be alone in their final moments. A woman who raised her son by herself and loved him so much that she visited his grave every single day for 6 years without missing once. And she still was not safe from being profiled and arrested for doing nothing wrong. That is the part that should make everyone uncomfortable. Because if it can happen to someone like Denise Carter, it can happen to anyone. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, remember these things. Stay calm. Do not resist physically. State your name and your reason for being there clearly. Ask for the officer's name and badge number. If possible, ask bystanders to record. File a formal complaint as soon as possible. And remember that standing up for your rights is not just about you. It is about everyone who comes after you. Officer Dale Briscoe made a choice that morning. He saw a black woman in a cemetery and decided she did not belong there. He did not ask questions first. He did not investigate. He did not treat her like a human being who might be grieving, who might be hurting, who might have every right in the world to be exactly where she was. He treated her like a suspect from the moment he stepped out of his cruiser, and that choice cost him everything he had. In the end, justice was served. But the whole situation should never have been necessary in the first place. A mother should be able to visit her son's grave without being arrested. That should not be a controversial statement. But for Denise Carter, on that Thursday morning in October, it was the most dangerous thing she could do. Thank you for watching until the end. Stories like this one need to be told, and they need to be shared. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button right now and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep bringing these stories to light. What was the most shocking part of this story for you? Was it the arrest itself? The scattered sunflowers next to Marcus's headstone? The fact that 9 previous complaints were ignored? Or was it the moment Denise went back to the cemetery after being released and placed fresh flowers at her son's grave all over again? Let me know in the comments below. Your voice matters, and this conversation is far from over.